Why didn't you open the gate fast so that I can drive in? Beat him!
She ordered security to beat the old gateman, unaware he was the man who raised her fiancé. She raised her hand and told the security guards to deal with the old gateman. Not just any gateman, the quiet, gray-haired man who had opened that gate for years. The man she called useless. The man she said was embarrassing her in front of her friends. She didn't know someone was watching. He wasn't supposed to arrive that early. He had forgotten his keys. He walked in just in time to see two guards shove the elderly man to the ground. The same man who had raised him, fed him when he had nothing, carried him on his back when life nearly broke him. She thought she was protecting her pride. She thought she was teaching a servant a lesson. She thought her fiancé would support her authority. But the moment their eyes met, she saw something she had never seen before. Not love, not admiration, disappointment. Now he's not just a fiancé, he's a son. And the woman he planned to marry just crossed a line that cannot be erased. Because the old gateman she ordered beaten is the only father he has ever known. And in the next few minutes, someone will choose between love and loyalty. She flicked her wrist like she was brushing dust off a designer bag, and the security guards straightened instantly. Sunlight bounced off her gold bracelets as her friends stood behind her, laughing too loudly, perfume mixing with the hot afternoon air. The old gateman had taken too long to open the gate, his hands trembling on the rusty latch. That small delay felt like an insult. Her lips tightened. Pride burned hotter than the Lagos heat. She tilted her chin and gave the command to handle him. And in that second, something irreversible began. The guards hesitated as the old man blinked slowly, confusion swimming in his tired eyes. His faded uniform clung to his thin frame, sweat darkening the collar. He had opened that gate for years, through storms, through power cuts, through long nights of silence. Now he stood there, shrinking under the weight of her glare. A car engine hummed behind her, expensive and impatient. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to stare. Authority demanded performance, so the guards grabbed his arms, and the compound air suddenly felt heavy. She crossed her arms as the old man stumbled, his sandals scraping the concrete with a dry sound. Dust rose around them like smoke from a small fire. Her heart pounded, but not from guilt, from the thrill of control. She had worked too hard to look powerful, to look untouchable. Weakness disgusted her. Embarrassment was a threat, and the sight of this frail man fumbling with the gate had felt like public sabotage. So she hardened her face. She told herself this was discipline, but deep down, something uglier was driving her. The first shove landed harder than expected, and the old man's shoulder hit the gatepost with a dull thud. A bird fluttered from a nearby tree as if startled by the sound. The laughter behind her stopped completely. One of her friends muttered that it was not that serious, but she ignored it. Backing down now would make her look weak. She needed dominance. She needed control. She needed this moment to prove she belonged in this level of life. But as the old man struggled to stay upright, destiny was already walking toward the gate. A black sedan rolled quietly into the street outside the compound, unnoticed by everyone except the gateman, whose blurred vision caught the familiar shine. The car slowed. The engine cut off. A door opened with a soft click that sounded louder than the shove. He tried to straighten himself, wiping dust from his cheek. The guards tightened their grip, unaware that everything was about to change. She adjusted her dress and flipped her hair, still performing strength. She didn't know someone had just stepped out of that car and was watching. He walked forward slowly, confusion turning to disbelief as the scene unfolded before him. His chest tightened when he saw the old man forced against the metal bars. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with humiliation. He wasn't supposed to be home early. He had forgotten his keys, cursed his own carelessness, and decided to return. Now he stood frozen just outside the gate, seeing a moment he could never unsee. The woman he loved stood tall. The man who raised him was on the ground, and time seemed to hold its breath. She noticed the silence first, not the car. The sudden stillness felt unnatural, like the air before a storm. She turned slightly, expecting applause or approval from her friends. Instead, she saw him standing there, face pale, eyes darker than she had ever seen. Something inside her dropped. Not fear. Not yet. But confusion. Why did he look at her like that? Why was there no understanding in his eyes? The guards loosened their grip instinctively, and the old man whispered a word that would split everything open. He stepped forward without realizing his legs were moving, gravel crunching under polished shoes that suddenly felt too expensive for the moment. The old man tried to stand straight despite the dust clinging to his skin, despite the guards still hovering like shadows around him. Sunlight exposed the wrinkles on his face, lines carved by years of sacrifice no one here had bothered to see. The compound that once felt like success now felt like a stage for betrayal. And as the wind pushed against the gate, memories began rising fast. He blinked once and saw not an old gateman, but a rainy night years ago when floodwater swallowed half the street. The man had lifted a skinny boy onto his back, shoes in one hand, umbrella broken by the wind. Cold water reached their knees, but his grip never loosened. Streetlights flickered, thunder cracked. The boy had been afraid of drowning. The man had whispered steady reassurance through the storm. Now that same back was bent, shoved against iron bars, and the past collided violently with the present. He inhaled sharply and remembered hunger, the kind that makes your stomach fold into itself. He remembered sitting on a wooden bench behind that same gate, waiting after school because there was nowhere else to go. The old man had split his own meal in half without hesitation, pretending he wasn't hungry. He had laughed off exhaustion, hiding how many hours he had already worked. That gate had not just guarded property, it had shielded a child from shame, and that child was standing here now, watching history being disrespected. She shifted uncomfortably as he walked closer, sensing the air change even if she didn't yet understand why. The friends behind her whispered and stepped back, sensing drama they hadn't signed up for. The old man avoided eye contact as if protecting him even now. That was his way. Quiet strength, silent endurance, never complain, never expose pain. Even humiliation was carried with dignity. But dignity does not erase wounds. And as dust swirled around their feet, something sacred felt dangerously close to breaking. He saw flashes of exam forms paid for with wrinkled cash, of late-night lantern light while homework was checked by tired but patient eyes. He remembered scraped knees cleaned gently with warm water and salt. He remembered being told he could become more than the street he was born into. Those words had built him brick by brick. Those sacrifices had turned him into the man who now drove a black sedan and wore tailored suits, and the woman he loved had just treated that foundation like dirt. She finally noticed the way he looked at the old man, not as a worker, but as something deeper, something rooted. Her confidence flickered for the first time. She had only seen a uniform, a position, a role. She had never asked who he was beyond the gate. The old man coughed softly, brushing dust from his sleeve as if embarrassed to be seen weak. The guards stepped away completely now, sensing tension shifting, and the silence between fiancé and future wife thickened like approaching rain. He stopped inches away from the old man and felt the weight of childhood settle in his chest. Gratitude is a quiet debt, but today it roared. He realized this wasn't just about respect, it was about identity. The man before him was the reason he stood tall at all. Without him, there would be no engagement ring, no luxury compound, no friends impressed by success. Everything she admired had been built by the very hands she ordered beaten, and the question forming in his heart felt heavier than anger. She straightened her shoulders as if posture alone could restore control, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her dress while the compound air pressed against her skin. The silence around her felt louder than the earlier shouting. She told herself this was being blown out of proportion. It was just a worker, just discipline, just maintaining standards. Her friends were still watching, even if they pretended not to. Image was everything, and she had spent her whole life fighting not to look small. But why did his eyes make her feel exposed? She glanced at the luxury cars parked neatly inside the compound, remembering the cramped apartment she grew up in, where neighbors whispered about unpaid rent. She had watched her mother shrink under insults, watched relatives treat them like burdens. That humiliation had planted something sharp inside her. She swore she would never be pitied again, never be looked down on. Success became her armor. Wealth became her language. Respect, in her mind, had to be enforced. But when did strength quietly turn into cruelty? She scrolled quickly through her phone as if distraction could erase what just happened, noticing the half-written caption for a photo she planned to post later. Perfect lighting, perfect ring, perfect future. Her friends measured worth in designer labels and curated smiles. She had learned to speak that language fluently. A slow gateman in a faded uniform felt like a stain on that picture. Embarrassment had hit her before compassion ever could, and she convinced herself that control meant survival. She forced a tight smile and tried to meet her fiancé's eyes again, expecting him to understand her logic. He knew how important presentation was. He moved in elite circles now. He understood standards. That was what she told herself. But the man standing before her looked different, not polished, not composed, but raw, hurt, disappointed. That word echoed louder than anger ever could. Disappointment meant something deeper had cracked, and she felt for the first time unsure of her ground. She remembered the first time she entered this compound as his girlfriend, heart racing at the size of the house, the marble floors, the quiet authority of wealth. She had promised herself she belonged here. She studied how to speak, how to dress, how to command space. She practiced confidence like it was a performance. Weakness had no place in her script. So when the gateman moved slowly today, days when her friends smirked, she reacted from that old fear of shrinking. But fear disguised as pride always leaves damage. She crossed her arms again, but now the gesture felt defensive instead of dominant. The old man's dusty sleeve caught her attention briefly, and she looked away quickly, unwilling to sit with discomfort. It was easier to label him insignificant than to examine herself. Easier to call it discipline than admit insecurity. She didn't hate him. She hated the reflection he stirred, the part of her that still felt like that little girl in a cramped room. But denial does not erase consequence. She inhaled slowly as whispers from her friends faded into background noise, realizing something bigger than embarrassment was unfolding. This was no longer about image. This was about character. And character, once questioned, is harder to defend than status. She sensed the shift in power without fully understanding it. The man she planned to marry was no longer looking at her with admiration. He was measuring her, and she suddenly wondered whether she had just failed a test she didn't know she was taking. He steps fully through the gate, shoes scraping against the concrete, and the sound alone feels like judgment. The air smells of dust and hot metal. The old man is still catching his breath, one hand pressed against the gatepost for balance. The guards retreat 2 slow steps, sensing they've crossed into something personal. The woman stiffens, waiting for him to speak, but he doesn't. He just stares at the scene like it's a nightmare playing in daylight, and the silence begins to say more than words ever could. He bends slightly to help the old man stand upright, fingers steady but trembling underneath. The fabric of the faded uniform feels thin, fragile, almost worn down by time itself. A flash of memory cuts through him, small hands gripping that same sleeve while learning how to cross a busy street. The smell of engine smoke, the warmth of protection. That sleeve had once been safety, Now it's stained with dust because of someone he loves, and his chest tightens with something dangerously close to rage. He straightens slowly and turns toward her, eyes no longer confused but searching. The compound feels smaller now, like walls are closing in. Her friends avoid his gaze, pretending to check their phones, pretending this isn't happening. The luxury cars look out of place, almost guilty, as if wealth itself is uncomfortable with the moment. Only he had built this life brick by brick, fueled by sacrifices she never witnessed. And the man who made it possible is standing humiliated at the very gate of success. He runs a hand through his hair, heartbeat drumming in his ears, and remembers exam days when fear nearly crushed him. The old man had waited outside school gates for hours, rain soaking through his shirt, just to walk him home with quiet pride. That patience had shaped him. That sacrifice had grounded him. And now the same gate is the site of disrespect. Fate has a cruel sense of timing. He wasn't supposed to be here today, but destiny doesn't ask permission before revealing truth. She takes one careful step toward him, trying to regain control, trying to soften the narrative forming in his eyes. Her voice starts but fades when she sees the depth of his disappointment. This isn't about a misunderstanding. It's about values, about foundation, about the difference between seeing a uniform and seeing a human being. The old man lowers his gaze, unwilling to create more conflict, still protecting the boy he raised. But protection cannot erase what was witnessed, and what was witnessed cannot be undone. He inhales sharply and looks back at the gate, the metal bars glinting under the afternoon sun. That gate had once symbolized safety. Now it feels like a dividing line. On one side stands love, ambition, shared dreams. On the other stands loyalty, gratitude, and history. He feels the weight of both pressing against his chest. Marriage suddenly feels less romantic and more like a decision about identity, because who you marry reflects who you are. And today, reflection feels uncomfortable. He clenches his jaw as neighbors begin appearing at their balconies, drawn by raised voices and shifting energy. Whispers float down like smoke. The world is watching now. Not just friends, not just family. The street itself feels like a witness. He realizes this moment will define something permanent, not just their relationship, but his own integrity. He can stay silent and keep peace, or he can defend the man who made him who he is. And the next move will change everything. He steps back slowly, creating space between himself and both of them, as if distance might help him think clearly. The afternoon sun presses down harder now, heat rising from the concrete in visible waves. Sweat forms at his temples, but the chill in his chest refuses to leave. On his left stands the woman he planned to marry, dressed in elegance, carrying shared dreams of a future already imagined. On his right stands the man who built his past with blistered hands and silent sacrifice, and the weight of choosing begins to crush him. He looks at her engagement ring glinting in the light, remembering the night he slipped it onto her finger. Soft music, candlelight, promises whispered with confidence. He had believed love could conquer anything. He had believed character matched beauty. But love feels fragile when tested by disrespect. A relationship is not just built on attraction. It stands on shared values. And right now, their values look like strangers. The ring shines brightly, but something underneath it has dimmed. He turns toward the old man and notices how he avoids eye contact, still trying to shrink himself to reduce tension. That humility hits harder than any shout could. The old man doesn't demand justice. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply stands there, bruised but dignified. That restraint reminds him of every lesson about patience, about strength without noise. And suddenly the question isn't whether she embarrassed him. It's whether he can trust her with the foundation of his life. She steps forward, her confidence cracking, trying to explain through hurried gestures and defensive energy. She speaks about respect, about discipline, about maintaining order. but her words feel thin against the memory of dust on the old man's sleeve. Justifications sound hollow when weighed against history. He studies her face, searching for remorse, searching for recognition of harm beyond image. What he finds instead is fear, not of what she did, but of losing what she might lose. He clenches his fists at his sides, feeling anger rise and then settle into something heavier: clarity. Marriage is not just romance, it is alignment. It is knowing that the person beside you would protect what matters most. And today, she attacked what matters most. That truth slices clean and sharp. He imagines future children watching how their mother treats elders. He imagines explaining this moment years later. And the thought makes his stomach twist. The neighbors lean further over balconies now, phones subtly raised, capturing fragments of the unfolding drama. The community watches not just a couple in conflict, but a test of character. In cultures rooted in respect for elders, this scene carries weight beyond personal feelings. This isn't just about pride, it's about values passed down through generations. And the longer he stays silent, the more it feels like complicity. Silence can protect love, but it can also betray loyalty. He exhales slowly and steps decisively toward the old man, positioning himself between him and everyone else. The gesture is small but unmistakable. Lines are being drawn without words. His future hangs in the balance, swaying between heart and history. The woman he loves watches his body language shift away from her, and panic flickers across her face. Well, because in that subtle movement, she understands something terrifying. He is no longer choosing comfort. He is choosing principle, and that changes everything. A balcony door slides open with a sharp metallic scrape, and a woman in a silk robe leans out, eyes wide, phone already recording. Across the street, a delivery bike slows, engine rumbling softer as the rider tilts his head to see better. Curtains twitch, gates creak. The compound that once felt private now feels like a public square. Heat shimmers above the pavement, carrying whispers like smoke. What started as a small command is turning into spectacle, and spectacle, once lit, spreads faster than fire. A murmur ripples through the gathering neighbors, low and restless, like wind before rain. Someone shakes their head slowly. Someone else mutters about respect and elders. A teenager angles his phone higher, zooming in on the dust still clinging to the old man's sleeve. Reputation is fragile. It cracks quietly before it shatters loudly. She feels the shift in the air, admiration dissolving into judgment. The audience she wanted now watches with a different lens, and the lens is unforgiving. Her friends retreat subtly, heels clicking backward across the tiles, distancing themselves from the center of gravity. One pretends to take a call, another avoids eye contact entirely. Loyalty built on status is thin, it tears under pressure. The laughter from minutes ago feels like it happened in another lifetime. She stands alone now, shoulders squared but pulse racing. The compound feels smaller, tighter, like walls closing in with every whisper. And the story forming in the crowd is no longer hers to control. He senses the cameras and straightens instinctively, not out of pride, but out of protection. This moment will travel beyond this gate. Screens will replay it. Narratives will grow legs. He glances at the old man, whose breathing has steadied but whose eyes carry quiet exhaustion. Dignity is being tested in high definition. He feels anger rise again, sharper now, fueled by the knowledge that humiliation multiplies when witnessed. And once the world sees something, it rarely forgets. She feels sweat trace down her spine despite the shade, suddenly aware that power has flipped without announcement. The same crowd she wanted to impress is now dissecting her character in real time. Social media thrives on moments like this: fast judgment, faster outrage. Her name, her face, on her engagement ring, all vulnerable to becoming symbols of arrogance. Fear replaces pride in her chest. Not fear of guilt, fear of consequence, and consequence is arriving quickly. A child's voice floats from somewhere behind the fence, asking an innocent question about why the old man is hurt. The simplicity of that voice cuts deeper than adult criticism. Children see things plainly. No titles, no class, just right and wrong. The old man lowers his head slightly, as if shielding the boy he once raised from this version of reality. But protection has limits, and today, protection feels fragile under so many watching eyes. He steps closer to the gate, scanning the crowd briefly before turning his back to them, choosing focus over spectacle. This is no longer about image, it is about decision. The noise around them grows, but inside him something settles into hard clarity. Public shame can destroy quickly, but private choice defines permanently. The world is watching how he responds. And in the tension between silence and action, his next move will echo far beyond this compound. He steps forward, clearing the space between himself and the crowd, voice low but unwavering, carrying weight that turns the air heavy. "Father," he says, and the single word lands like a hammer. Conversations stop mid-breath. Phones tilt down slowly. Laughter dies. Her chest tightens as if the sound pressed against it physically. The old man freezes, hands still on the gate, face lifting slightly, recognition and quiet pride mingling in his eyes. What had been a servant is suddenly sacred, untouchable. And the world she tried to impress is witnessing her ignorance in slow motion. She staggers slightly, surprise freezing her legs. Pride had carried her until now, but now it feels brittle, fragile, like glass under pressure. Her friends glance at each other nervously, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. The crowd leans in, sensing revelation. That single word rewrites everything. The old man's identity, the man she ordered beaten, is no longer hidden. And her hands, still clenched, tremble slightly, realizing that status does not override history, nor does fashion outrank loyalty. The old man straightens fully, dignity restored in a subtle shift of shoulders. He never demanded recognition, never sought reward. And yet, he now stands at the center of moral gravity, unmovable and unwavering. The sun catches his silver hair. It's turning it into a halo of endurance. He does not raise his voice. He does not strike back. His calm alone is a rebuke, and she feels it like a shockwave. She wanted power, but she has only exposed vulnerability, ignorance, and cruelty. He looks at her, eyes dark, calculating. Disappointment shines brighter than anger ever could. That disappointment carries memory, loyalty, gratitude, and every quiet lesson the old man taught him. He sees the arrogance she believed would impress crumble into exposure. The engagement ring feels suddenly heavy on his finger, not a symbol of love, but a chain of accountability. And for the first time, she realizes that her actions have consequences beyond wealth, image, or approval. Whispers ripple through the neighbors and friends, spreading faster than fire. "Father," someone breathes. "Is that true?" The word echoes, bouncing off walls, through balconies, and into hearts. Community judgment now intertwines with personal revelation. Eyes that once admired her now dissect her every move. Social hierarchy, image, and pride falter in the face of revealed truth. And she feels for the first time what it is to be powerless in front of those who truly matter. He steps closer to the old man, hand brushing briefly against his shoulder, a subtle touch loaded with gratitude, loyalty, and protection. The moment is quiet but seismic. The crowd senses it, that alignment of past and present, sacrifice and recognition. Her attempts at control falter further. Her voice, when it comes, is softer than intended, faltering under the weight of revelation. And in the tension between silence and speech, she understands a truth she cannot ignore. The man she humiliated is the backbone of the person she loves most. As cameras continue to hover and phones tilt, he glances at her one last time, letting the weight of his judgment settle. Her eyes widen, reading the verdict not in words but in unwavering presence. Every gesture she made to assert dominance, every smug glance, every command, now hangs in the air like dust, waiting to settle on reality. And in that suspended moment, the power balance tilts irreversibly. The servant is no longer just a man in uniform, he is the foundation of everything, and she finally sees the magnitude of what she has done. The engagement ring glints sharply under the afternoon sun, but it no longer feels like a symbol of love. It feels like a weight pressing against her finger, heavy with consequence. Guests pause mid-step, champagne glasses frozen halfway to mouths, whispers slicing the air like knives. The music from the stereo in the compound falters under tension. What was meant to celebrate union now trembles on the edge of disaster. Every photo op moment she had imagined vanishes, replaced with the raw sting of exposure. Pride had led her here, and shame follows close behind. She shifts on her heels, aware of every eye on her, each pair silently questioning, judging. Friends who once fawned now glance sideways, uncertain where allegiance should lie. Phones tilt toward the unfolding scene, capturing every tremor of her faltering composure. The guards remain stiff but cautious, sensing the shift in authority. The black sedan sits silent, its engine off as he steps deliberately between her and the old man. The room, the entire compound, contracts, waiting for the next move. And she realizes celebration is no longer possible. He studies her, and disappointment radiates in waves thicker than heat. Every memory of her confidence, her laughter, her charm collapses under that gaze. She had hoped admiration would follow her orders. Instead, she feels the weight of misjudgment, of moral misstep. The man she planned to marry, the one she believed would shield her pride, now carries judgment. He is silent, but silence can be sharper than any rebuke. And in the quiet, she feels the unraveling of everything she assumed she controlled. Neighbors peek from balconies, phones poised, capturing fragments of what will soon spread far beyond this street. The story is no longer private, it's a public lesson. Even staff in the compound step lightly, unsure which side of loyalty they should align with. Social hierarchy, carefully constructed over months, trembles. Her mother's warnings echo faintly in her memory. Humility is strength, arrogance is fragile, and now, in front of every eye, that lesson becomes unavoidable. Every whisper magnifies her misstep. The old man straightens, dignity unshaken, and the subtle calmness intensifies her panic. He doesn't speak, but the truth radiates through posture, through quiet resilience. History has been revealed. Sacrifice cannot be undone, and every gesture she made in arrogance now feels hollow, meaningless. She had tried to craft an image of dominance, but she sees it crumbling, brick by brick, before her eyes. Reality hits harder than any public confrontation could. Power misused can reverse in an instant. She opens her mouth, hesitates, closes it. Words fail where actions are witnessed. The house, once a symbol of dreams and promises, now feels like a courtroom. Every laugh she expected to hear is replaced by silence heavy enough to press against her chest. Even the scent of polished marble, usually calming, smells sterile and accusing. The scene tightens around her like a vice, and she feels trapped not by walls but by consequence. Every step she planned now seems meaningless in the face of truth. He takes a small step forward, placing himself fully between her and the old man. The world seems to hold its breath as the energy shifts entirely. Celebration is gone. Admiration has vanished. The audience, neighbors, friends, staff, watches an engagement turn into reckoning. She feels it instinctively. This is more than humiliation. It is a moral collapse. And the question lingers in the air, heavy and suffocating. Can love survive when loyalty and history have been so openly betrayed? The same gate she had used to assert dominance now feels like a boundary she cannot cross. Its iron bars glint in the sun, rigid and unyielding, a silent reminder that authority is fragile when rooted in arrogance. Dust swirls in the slight breeze, catching on the folds of her dress as if mocking her. Every polished surface of the compound, marble floors, glass windows, luxury cars, now seems to reflect judgment rather than prestige. She stands still, realizing that the power she wielded so easily moments ago has already slipped like sand through her fingers. He watches her, chest tight, pulse steady but sharp, as the old man shifts his weight, dignity unshaken. No words, no revenge. His calm radiates authority in a way she cannot challenge. The wind lifts a strand of silver hair across the old man's forehead, and sunlight catches it, turning it into a crown of quiet endurance. That crown cannot be stolen. That calm cannot be commanded. The realization hits her harder than any insult could. Strength without humility is brittle, and her attempt to dominate only revealed her fragility. Around them, the compound feels different, heavier, charged. Whispers ripple through neighbors leaning over balconies, murmurs that weave moral judgment into the summer air. Phones tilt, capturing every twitch of emotion. Even the guards who had obeyed her commands now shift uneasily, sensing that obedience cannot shield them from the weight of moral truth. Public power is only valid when backed by justice. She had tried to enforce it through fear and status, but karma, slow, steady, and undeniable, has its own timeline. Her shoulders slump slightly, instinctively, though she fights to hold posture. The wind tugs at her scarf and hair as if teasing the illusion of control. Every move she made to assert dominance now feels hollow, meaningless. She had imagined triumph. She had imagined loyalty. She had imagined admiration. Instead, the quiet justice of history, patience, sacrifice, love that cannot be commanded, humbles her instantly. She realizes that the life she curated for appearances cannot protect her from consequences she ignored. The old man steps a little closer to the gate, posture unshaken, eyes steady. He does not speak. He does not complain. Every inch he claims quietly shifts the balance of authority. The power she thought she held is exposed as empty. Karma doesn't need loud words or retaliation. It moves in the subtle shifts, in the moral reckoning written in history and witnessed by community. Every gesture of arrogance she made is now mirrored back as consequence, every command a lesson in humility she cannot avoid. She swallows hard, the taste of dust and tension filling her mouth. The luxury she wore like armor feels heavy, oppressive. Her friends inch away, realizing her image no longer protects her. Phones record, voices whisper. What was meant to be elegance has become exposure. The reality of cause and effect, pride inviting downfall, is no longer theoretical. It moves, palpable, around the compound, enveloping her in a lesson she cannot ignore. He takes a deep breath, letting the tension settle like concrete between them. The crowd waits. Silence grows. The old man's calm presence fills the space.
The anchor of history and principle. She had tried to bend reality to her will, to enforce power through fear and image. Now she stands in the space where authority meets consequence. The gate, the dust, the watching neighbors, all converge as one undeniable truth. Strength is measured by respect, not fear, and humility outlasts pride. And she finally feels the weight of karma at the gate. Her knees feel suddenly heavy as she steps forward, hands trembling at her sides. Dust clings to the folds of her dress, sticky under the sun, as if mocking her. Eyes that once admired her now flicker with judgment. She opens her mouth, but words falter, sliding into silence. She had rehearsed apologies, excuses, explanations, but none feel enough. Every gesture feels reactive, hollow.
like trying to patch a dam after the flood has already swept through. The old man doesn't move. He doesn't shout. His stillness hits harder than anger ever could. Tears begin to form, slipping unbidden down her cheeks, warm and stinging. Pride had once shielded her from vulnerability, but exposure strips it away brutally. She drops to one knee instinctively, a symbolic gesture she had once thought dramatic, now desperate. Her hands rise slightly as if reaching for a lifeline that doesn't exist. Around her, whispers swirl, neighbors leaning in, phones recording. The crowd is silent yet piercing, reflecting every misstep. Her image, carefully crafted over years, unravels faster than she can comprehend. She speaks, voice breaking, but words falter like broken instruments. I'm sorry, she says, each syllable heavy with fear and shame. But sincerity cannot be measured in timbre alone. The damage done stretches further than words can reach. Loyalty is not easily repaired. The man she humiliated is not just an employee. He is the father figure, the foundation, the architect of her fiancé's life. And every action she took to assert status now feels like a betrayal echoing across time. The old man shifts slightly, adjusting his stance but remaining composed. He doesn't accept her apology immediately. His silence is deliberate, weighted, and suffocating. Each second she waits feels infinite, a countdown to judgment she cannot control. She realizes that forgiveness cannot be demanded or bought. It must be earned. And in this moment, she faces the hardest truth. Some wounds, once inflicted, do not heal easily, no matter the tears shed or words spoken. Her fiancé watches quietly, chest tight, jaw set. He does not intervene. His gaze alternates between her and the man who raised him. The moral weight of the scene presses down like lead. Marriage is meant to unite, but here it feels like a crossroads of integrity. He feels the conflict tearing at him. The woman he loves is exposing herself in humility, yet the trust shattered may not be recoverable. Love cannot exist without respect, and respect cannot exist without acknowledgement of what truly matters. She bows her head further, shoulders trembling, realizing too late that fear had never been enough to guide her actions. Apology without understanding is a hollow act. She had tried to assert power to protect pride, but what remains is only exposure. Sweat and tears mix. The sun beating down on her face as if nature itself emphasizes the lesson. Humility is crushing, but it is necessary, and the crowd senses it. The punishment lies not in vengeance, but in the weight of conscience and consequence. For a moment, the world seems suspended. Silence envelops the compound, heavy and complete. She waits, trembling for mercy that may not come. And in the quiet, she understands the depth of her mistake. Apology can soothe, but only recognition and transformation restore. She is exposed, humbled, and left to confront the truth she ignored. Status cannot erase history. Pride cannot overshadow loyalty, and some bridges, once burned, leave scars too deep to cross again. He steps forward, his shadow stretching across the sunlit concrete, blocking the gap between apology and consequence. His chest rises and falls steadily, but his mind races with every memory of the old man who raised him. Each sacrifice, each sleepless night, each quiet lesson about integrity presses against his conscience. On one side stands the woman he loves, or radiant and tearful, begging for forgiveness. On the other stands the man who shaped his life, a figure of patience and unwavering loyalty. And in the tension between them, the weight of decision presses heavier than any jewel or promise. He glances at her engagement ring, the symbol of commitment now feeling cold, almost alien. Love had seemed enough once, but the foundations beneath it are cracked. Respect, gratitude, and moral alignment weigh more heavily than desire. His mind flashes to future children, wondering what example this would set. Would they see love without integrity? Would they witness loyalty abandoned for pride? The vision twists in his chest. Marriage is supposed to unite, but how can unity exist when one side disrespects the roots of the other? He steps closer to the old man, gently brushing a hand against his shoulder, a quiet affirmation that loyalty and history are honored first. The crowd senses the shift, whispering, leaning in, caught in the moral fulcrum of the moment. Friends step back, unsure how to interpret the silent statement. Every gesture, deliberate or subtle, now carries monumental weight. He realizes this decision is not about vengeance or punishment. It is about defining who he truly is and what values he refuses to compromise. She reaches out, voice trembling, words faltering into silence, begging silently through eyes alone. The heat presses down on her, sweat tracing her temples, while the dust swirls like accusation. She had imagined he would choose her love over history, her charm over principle, but as he studies both faces, the choice becomes clear. Loyalty is not optional. Integrity is non-negotiable. Love, she realizes, is fragile without the scaffolding of respect, and her actions have shaken that foundation beyond immediate repair. His gaze returns to the old man, seeing every scar, every wrinkle, every sacrifice etched into his being. The man who had been called servant, gatekeeper, forgotten, now stands as the measure of everything he values. To protect the old man is to protect the soul of the person he has become. The crowd watches breathless, sensing that the decision will reverberate far beyond this moment. History meets choice, and character is forged under the weight of consequence. He exhales slowly, decision crystallizing with clarity sharper than sunlight. Silence stretches before action. The woman, aware of the finality in his posture, understands that compromise will not follow. He will not bend loyalty for comfort, will not trade respect for affection, will not allow love to blind him to truth. The engagement, the celebration, the dreams she imagined, all fragile illusions compared to the moral stakes laid bare. He has chosen principle over desire, history over fantasy. In that suspended moment, every spectator feels the gravity. Neighbors, friends, staff, all witness a man defining himself by the people who built him, not by the allure of romantic convenience. The old man is protected, dignity restored, humility celebrated. She realizes the depth of her mistake, the impossibility of erasing it with mere apology. And he steps back, letting the choice echo. Love cannot survive betrayal. Status cannot replace loyalty, and integrity will always weigh more than desire. The moral spine of the story stands unshakable, leaving a lesson for all watching. The compound falls quiet, heavy with the weight of what just unfolded. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the gate where power and pride collided with history and loyalty. Neighbors linger on balconies, whispering in hushed tones, replaying every gesture, every glance, every command that led to this moment. Phones tilt toward screens, capturing proof of the lesson etched into the day. The story will travel beyond streets, beyond the city, beyond the compound itself. And in every frame, the moral is undeniable. Respect is earned, not commanded. She sits on the edge of the marble steps, head lowered, hands pressed together as if praying for mercy that can no longer erase shame. Pride has crumbled. Fear and regret have taken its place. May her expensive heels rest unevenly on the dust, the luxury beneath her now meaningless. She had thought wealth, image, and authority could protect her from consequence. Now she understands the truth. Nothing shields one from the moral reckoning that history and loyalty demand. And the community sees her humility, forced and raw, as a cautionary tale. He stands firmly between her and the old man, not out of anger, but principle. Every eye in the crowd follows him, every whisper pauses for the gravity of his presence. He is not acting for applause, he is acting for justice. The crowd absorbs the lessons silently. Love is fragile without respect, Status cannot replace gratitude, and integrity is not negotiable. The air itself seems to hum with recognition. The quiet man in uniform, once dismissed as nothing, that now defines the measure of strength. The old man straightens, eyes soft but unshakable, dignity restored without a word. His life of silent sacrifice, of carrying a boy through hunger, fear, and uncertainty, now radiates through every observing soul. Community members nod subtly, understanding the depth of loyalty, of patience, of quiet power. No celebration, no public applause could match this moment of moral clarity. And she finally comprehends. The hands that built the person she loves were never just servants. They were foundations. Children peek cautiously from behind gates, absorbing more than the adults might realize. They see humility, courage, and principle play out before them. They see that appearance and authority are not true measures of character. Lessons unspoken have been etched into the minds of the young. Treat those who support and sacrifice for you with respect, or face the public reckoning that pride invites. And in that, the moral transcends generations. She glances at him, her fiancé, and for the first time sees admiration and alignment in the same frame. But it is not her victory. It is the triumph of principle, the power of moral backbone, and the justice of history recognized. The engagement ring glints, heavy with meaning, a reminder that love without respect is empty. Around them, the community feels the echo of the moment, a lesson that will ripple far beyond the day, the street, and the compound. And as the sun sets, casting long shadows over the gate where everything shifted, the lesson crystallizes for all who watched. Never despise the hands that built the people you love. Authority is not measured by uniform, wealth, or social standing. True strength is patience, humility, and respect for the foundations laid before you. The quiet man at the gate was more than a gatekeeper. He was the backbone of a life. And now, the community will never forget it.